Hello and welcome to DesignCast, a podcast where I interview a wide range of excellent guests in design and STEAM education to get their unique perspectives. My name is Jason Reagan, and I use my 20 plus years of experience as a design educator to dig deep into complex issues. This podcast has one simple mission: to create a community of people around the world that are interested in design and STEAM education. Each episode, I chat with guests from all corners of the design world, from classroom teachers to authors and even to educational consultants. We discuss a wide range of topics that we feel are relevant today. I do want to ask you that if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave a review, rate, subscribe, share, or download from your favorite podcasting app. This helps the podcast get discovered by listeners that might not find it otherwise. Also, it helps me to continually define the direction of future guests and episodes. Feel free to drop by my website, www.jasonreagan.ga, to leave me a comment or to sign up to be considered as a future guest on future episodes. Also, don't forget to stop by Anchor and leave me a voice clip that could even end up in an upcoming show. Thanks for listening, so let's get to it. Welcome back to yet again another edition of DesignCast, and thank you guys who continue to listen, and welcome to anyone who's a first-time listener. I'm Jason Reagan, your host, and on this episode, I had the distinct honor of speaking with Mr. Andy Richardson. I connected with Andy via social media and through mutual colleagues several years ago. He's an industrial arts and design technology teacher at Northfield Public School District number 659 in St. Paul, Minnesota. Andy just completed a 6-year stint at the Lincoln Community School in Ghana, West Africa, where he was the head of design. During this time in Ghana, Andy successfully planned and implemented several maker fairs in the school community. We had an awesome time chatting about the struggles and successes of pulling off such an event, and I'm sure you're going to find something valuable in our conversation. I'd also like to ask anyone who is enjoying the podcast to review it anywhere you listen to it, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Podcasts or wherever you might listen to it. Please subscribe and share it with your professional network. Also, please check out my other podcast guest appearances, where I talk about a bunch of different topics on all kinds of different things and in different time zones and all over the place with other content creators from around the world. You can see this full list of my appearances at my website, which is www.jasonreagan.ga. If you listened to the episode with Ivo Hanan back in Season 2 of this podcast, you will hopefully remember that he and I have been working on a Design Network Alliance. We are ready to share that with you guys, and the link to set that up and to sign up for it is in the show notes. But if you're following along and don't have the show notes in front of you, it's gg.gg/Design Network Alliance. And we look forward to hearing from you. Now sit back and enjoy this chat with Andy. You can always connect with Andy on LinkedIn. Thanks so much. Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of DesignCast, and I'm Jason Reagan, your host, and I'm really excited and honored to have Andy Richardson here with me. Well, my goodness, I don't even know how we actually connected. Andy, it's been over all kinds of different channels and networks, and as we were saying before we started, the world is a really interconnected place, and so I'm really excited to have you here, Andy. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So
Great.
Andy, if you don't mind, thank you, man, for being here. And if you don't mind kind of giving everyone a little bit of a introduction, maybe if they've not connected with you before, like who you are and what you've been doing and what your plans are.
Yeah, awesome. So I've been teaching at Lincoln Community School in Accra, Ghana for the last 6 years. I've been mostly in IB education, IB schools, teaching design, which has been, wonderful experience. I was originally trained as an individuals and societies teacher in the IB, and over time I've migrated to design, which I love teaching, and that's been great. And yeah, so I've taught overseas in Ghana and Korea, and my wife also is a teacher with me. She's an IB coordinator, MYP coordinator. So, and of course the family, 2 boys with me as well. My youngest just graduated this year in the middle of the pandemic. And so that was a new experience for us all, of course. But yeah, so that's, where I've been, and now I'm in Minnesota, partly because of COVID-19 and starting to look for new opportunities here.
Yeah, I know we were saying before we started how, things have changed even from the last 6 months, that folks had plans to do one thing and do things. So it's about flexibility, right? I'm sure things will work out for you guys, and you and your wife are a power couple. And so I have no doubt will
Yeah, I'm
materialize for
sure
you
something
guys.
will.
Tell me a little bit sort of about your journey. I think you mentioned earlier that you started maybe in the Peace Corps or something. Tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about how that kind of came about.
Yeah, I went to St. Olaf College in Minnesota, and just so happens that St. Olaf has a really high proportion of students that end up going into the Peace Corps. As I was looking at graduation and thinking about, what I want to do, honestly, I didn't know, right? Because I had a construction background, right? So I'd done construction through high school and college. So I was like, well, okay, maybe Peace Corps would be a good fit. I could go build stuff at least. My wife and I were married at the time, and we got to do the Peace Corps together. When I came back from that, I really knew I wanted to go into education, that was really going to be what I wanted to do. So I started pursuing my, education license, my first master's there. I actually didn't teach right away. I did other things just because of the way the job market was and things at the time. But, in 2005, I started teaching at a project-based school here in St. Paul, which I really loved. Like, that was a lot of fun. I really liked the agency the kids had, and I really liked, working with them on whatever they were passionate about and interested in. But we also had that feeling of like, once our kids were old enough, like, oh, I really want to go overseas. Like Peace Corps was kind of in us, right? So then our first overseas experience was, working in Korea, and again, as a family, and that was a great experience. We loved Korea. So that's kind of my roots. And options like design weren't really open here in Minnesota at the time, unless I wanted to teach like industrial arts, like technology, which is great. Like, I would teach that, but that wasn't going to open up opportunities for me to teach internationally. Unfortunately, at the time, it seemed like going to be a tough sell to tell people, that this experience would translate internationally. So
I can relate. I'm actually a trained industrial arts teacher and technology ed teacher. It was hard to break into the international school market as an industrial arts teacher. It took SARS, another pandemic to happen, where a bunch of folks left China, and I had an opportunity come up because they were like, we're pretty desperate. So it worked out great for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't any slight on me. It was just that you have to have experience from somewhere, right? Like, someone has to give you a shot. So I'm with you. I mean, like, I know that it can limit you, but it sounds like even with your background in construction and all these things, that you were always a design teacher at heart.
Right. I mean, kind of what ended up happening in my classroom a lot was I just brought a lot of technology into my, is basically teaching history, geography, economics is individuals and societies classes. But the amount of technology I integrated along the way kind of got people's attention. Like, whoa, that's interesting. I haven't seen that done before. And, that actually led to my principal coming to me and saying, I think you could do this design position that we want to really push and get going here. Even though I wasn't teaching design, I kept, design thinking mindset that I brought to class along with technology. And then, so it worked out in a really nice way for me to move from, teaching individual society, which I also love. The conversation and the topics and everything is fantastic, but then it worked out nicely for me to transition to design.
That's awesome. I actually know quite a few INS teachers who've become design teachers. So I think there's a particular connective tissue there. Well, actually, if you start looking, all the subjects sort of connect to design.
Yeah.
And this continues to be a theme through almost every episode of this podcast, as you see that, wait a minute, and I actually think that all teachers should be trained as design teachers along with their subject, because these project-based, like you mentioned, you could be a much better project-based teacher understanding the design cycle and understanding how design works, right? So,
yeah.
well, that's great.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about how you got involved in maker fairs. I hear that you've got some experience with that. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started and what you've done with that?
I've been interested in them for quite a while, but the thing that really kicked off the Maker Faire idea, my current school where I am, was attending a Learning 2 conference in Warsaw, Poland. There was a design program that was being established there at the time. It wasn't quite running, but man, it was going to be cool, and you could tell like there's a lot of energy behind it. And they had just done, if I remember right, they had just completed their first school Maker Faire. They did a presentation and just a workshop about here's how it worked and here's how you could do it. Another teacher and I from Lincoln Community School were at that session, and we were just like, yes, we're going to do it. So when we got back to Ghana, we had everything we needed kind of organizationally to at least propose it and present it. Fortunately, we had a lot of support from our administrators, and they were a little worried about when could we do it, busy schedules, all that kind of stuff. But basically let's find a spot. And as long as we can find a time to do it, let's do it. And, I really have to credit them with ambiguity, like being good with ambiguity, because we had a lot of times where we're like, I don't know how that works, right? Like, I'm not sure. We haven't done this before, but they were like, okay, keep going. And it was a lot to organize, but the principle of the thing, right, is that learning doesn't only happen in the classroom. It's happening all the time. It's happening when, students are at home, when they're at school. Making things is a way of consolidating their learning. They have to make meaning of their own learning. And what does that look like? It looks a little different for every kid. And the Maker Faire is sort of a really nice way, I think, to kind of showcase student learning, and how students are making sense of whatever they're learning, being able to, express themselves in a way that is public, but also fun and hopefully not scary, right? So that's always a little concern. I thought, if we get 30 kids to participate, I'm going to be like, yes, excellent, successful first school Maker Faire. Because we have a school at the time, I think it's about 700 students, pretty close to that now, I guess. We ended up having a little over 300 that participated, right? So as the enrollments were coming in and as kids were registering, I was starting to get a little worried, because then I had to think about, gosh, where are we going to put all these kids, right? Like, where are all these projects going to go? And some of them were large, they're going to have to be delivered on a trailer. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just to say that it was really well received, that it filled some kind of need or feeling that the community had, that this is something that, was missing or that was important for the community. So felt really good about that. And yeah, aside from the organizational hurdles and all the sort of problems we had to overcome, the learning that students showcased was amazing. I think everybody was impressed by the level of learning that students were demonstrating too, that they brought on their own. No teacher was saying, well, you have to do this, and here's the due date, and here's your grade, and you know what I mean? There was none of that. It was just what have you got? What are you excited about? Bring it and show us, and really it kind of blew us away, I think. Yeah, we had a lot of slime on the slime table, and maybe we could have had less slime but that was very popular. But overall, it was fantastic day that we put together, and we were able to repeat it once. It got even bigger. We had a little over 400 participants last year. And then after the first year, the parents were like, well, can we participate more in this? And so then we also had parents coming in. And so, yeah, we just had a jam-packed, basically gymnasium over the course of a day, over 500 participants in and out of there. And yeah, just amazing. And then this year, of course, we ran into COVID-19, but we still managed to put on a small, virtual Maker Faire, which was pretty cool. We just did it on Flipgrid because we were just trying to find the easiest platform to, where there could be some kind of exchange back and forth. So, the maker fairs have been really, really positive. It really surprised me how good they've been, how well they've gone.
I'm inspired. So tell me how you go about, is it something you need to like register with Make and that kind of thing? Like what's the kind of the logistics behind it? How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So if you go to the Make website, they'll have on there, it'll say, on their main menu at the top, it'll have all their different topics. And one of them is maker fairs. And if you click on that, it also will bring up school maker fairs. It's very easy to register. So we registered, I think they use a Google form. Yeah, they use a Google form. And you just register on their Google form, like, we're this school, we want to hold at this date. And then they send you basically a package Google Doc organizational materials. And so then it's great. Like, there's an entire checklist of everything you need to do, everything you need to manage. So it's really well laid out. They give you sort of all the things you need to think through to create the team you need to pull it off. Yeah, so once you've done that, it takes some organization. And as I said, the problem for us was the sort of numbers and space. And then in Ghana, it can be weather too. So one of these things where you got to kind of play with all these variables until you figure out something that works. And for us, it meant rotating students through our gymnasium all day long, basically. So they had to keep coming and going basically on the hour to get them all in and participating. So, I guess we also had some performance spaces that we set off in different rooms too. So when we have music and those kinds of things that students wanted to participate with, we had somewhere set aside for them as well. But we tried to do most of it in our gymnasium because that really was our only option. Honestly, we had some space issues. So
I understand. And, and you've been in international schools for a while, so you understand that, often a big community event is centered around cultural things. Like it might be an international day, or it might be some sort of food festival. So to have something like this, where there's design thinking involved and there's, people sharing their passions and stuff like that, what a neat dynamic and a whole new layer of school community life. And so did you notice any positive side effects of having these things in your school community?
Yeah, I think one really positive, aside from the happiness of the students and just sort of the joy of the students, was how the parents also felt really able to be involved and participate. So I know when you have a school science fair, for instance, it's often discouraged that parents maybe don't participate. But this we were just you want to do this with your child, go ahead, you do it together, and then you come together and let's see it. And then so that was received really well. And then I think in the international school community in Ghana, there's often, there's just the way life works is you often have one parent who can be more involved with the school than the other parent, right? So I think that this was really kind of a rich experience for those parents who, were able to just come and participate. And I think it was a great way, I think, to, especially in the second year, as I mentioned, to leverage and work with parents in their own students' learning, right? So that they felt, invited into the learning process of the student, and they felt invited into the learning life of the school. Had just many parents almost more excited than their kids, right, about what they were doing, working on. And so I thought that was a really great way to involve parents in the life of learning in the school, essentially by bringing a lot of learning from home and saying, this totally counts in school, in this school maker fair activity. And, thanks for participating in all this, right? So that was a really big thing, I think, as far as it seemed to me the climate of the school even changed a bit right after that. That we are a pretty tight community at Lincoln Community School, I think, and a good, pretty strong community, but it was just we're all involved in this thing together. And I think that was felt throughout the community, which was really cool.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
I'm excited. I want to think of ways I can do that myself wherever I'm at. And being that you guys were in Ghana, were there issues with sourcing materials and things sometimes, or was it not
Always.
really? Yeah, always. So how would you guys go about
Yeah.
finding things that you needed?
Okay, well, we had a lot of fails. I mean, we had some funds to make sort of a vacuum cleaner hovercraft that we wanted to build, and we knew how to make it, and we just needed to get hold of a shop vac basically, or just a vacuum motor that was going to be big enough. And oh my gosh, so we had to basically leave that, and we couldn't do it. I mean, we just couldn't come up with some of the materials we needed for some of the projects that students wanted to do. Yeah, so in Ghana, one thing I love about Ghana is it's always about innovation. Ghanaians are great about saying, well, I can't get this part for my car, or I can't get this part for this other thing, and so I'm just going to make it, like I'm going to MacGyver it. And often their solutions are better than the original part anyway, right? So that's like a constant problem in Ghana, but it's also in Ghana, like design thinking is built into life, right? It's just, things are always going wrong. In Ghana, people are always trying to figure out how to solve the problem in some innovative way. Yeah, I'm always amazed at like the solutions they come up with, and they work, right? So it's like, I don't know why like engineering firms aren't going to Ghana to hire a lot of people, because, they really should be.
Now that I'm in Korea, it's my third year here. I was in China before that. And early on in China, it was like camping all the time, every day. It's how your life was, but which I'm sure is a lot like Ghana is now. But then you're in Korea where, there's 5G outside everywhere, and there's internet everywhere. And, there's no trash cans because everything's underground and things like that. So imagine those differences. Did that affect the way you taught? Actually, the way you did things?
Yeah, I often look back and say, I wish I had taken advantage of things more, because things would happen and it's just like, man, like the city would flood, right? And then suddenly nobody could move, and then there were all sorts of environmental things that would pop up like that, or all sorts of needs that would pop up that I really, I wish I had, been able to dig into more, so disadvantaged kids, for instance, not having access to education, but part of the reason might be because they just simply can't get to school, or disabled kids who really can't, they can't sit in a normal chair, but they don't have the proper, the proper wheelchairs or the proper crutches or the proper equipment to basically, do school like most kids might do school, right? Those are like opportunities that I really wish I'd been able to dig into more, because they were there, but we were able to at least talk about those things in class, right? And just think about, bring in like real life situations into class quite often, and work on, trying to make the world a little better by whatever we were doing. And it was great because kids would always be bringing stuff in, like, Mr. Richardson, did you know that did you know about this problem, or did you know about this school, or did you know about this situation? And so the kids too were, often really thinking about the community that they lived in, which I loved. I just wish I could have taken, more advantage of it as a teacher myself.
Well, maybe with how exciting the Maker Faire movement was, and maybe that will spark some further action from your students. Because I know one thing in looking at your school and in the situations, it seems like everything is really service oriented, and there's a lot of service that happens and action that happens in the school. And so maybe people will start connecting those dots.
There's definitely
you're only one guy, right? You can only help do so much. But no, I understand. And I can imagine with your INS background too, looking at the anthropology behind, how things develop and things and people and movements of those folks. And so that sounds like it was really exciting. And I'm sure you're going to miss those days, but we have, I'm sure, more challenges ahead of us.
I think so.
This new world of education that is starting to unfold. And so looking ahead, what's something you're really, really excited about at the moment? Just in general, anything you're excited about?
I am really excited about, in general, about innovation and education. And I actually just completed a second master's degree in administration, because what I'm really interested in is like, how does innovation work in schools, right? And how can we really kind of drive that in schools to benefit kids, right? To benefit students in learning. So yeah, I get really excited when I see things like Flow 21 out of Web, or, some of the other innovative things that are happening in schools. In Ethiopia, for instance, they've got a Plex program now, which I think is really interesting, and flexible block scheduling, where students have some agency to work on things that they want to work on. And I get really excited when I start seeing those kinds of things happening in schools and doing innovative work that's going to benefit learners. So, part of that is design for me, thinking about like all the different ways that design can be integrated into all that and be part of that. And then, I think part of my background is actually anthropology, and that's the anthropologist side of looking at like how do cultures work, how do they change for the better, hopefully to benefit kids. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about what I'm starting to see in international schools. And then like the Learning to conferences and stuff, there's a lot of that's been a rich place for me to learn. Coattail, which you may be familiar with, completed a Coattail certificate a couple years ago. But yeah, sort of all of that energy about like, how do we make education more innovative for the benefit of kids and learning. Yeah, I get pretty excited about that.
Well, let's hope that the new educational landscape, not only in international schools, but even in public schools and around the world, will start to see that this innovation is important, especially with how so many schools were caught off guard with the COVID stuff and going online and all of that, and seeing the importance in that, and being innovative and thinking about things in a flexible way. So yeah, I agree with you. I think the innovation is something I'm excited about too. And I'm going to look up those programs that you're talking about. I'm familiar with WAB. I wasn't familiar with the one in Ethiopia, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So Andy, tell me one ed tech tool that you can't live without.
I don't know if this qualifies as a tool, but like without it, it would have been so much harder. But just like Google Docs have been just critical, right? In the last few months here. I mean, my classroom was already blended. Kids were already using Google Docs. I'm so glad, because this would have been so much harder if I was still on, Microsoft Word or other platforms that don't lend themselves so the sharing and collaboration. So anything that's about sharing and collaboration, like that's been really important in my teaching. And then I would just add one more that I think is really important to me in my classroom, which is Scratch. My students get their first taste of programming with Scratch, and that I love that program because light bulbs just start blinking and going off. So those are the two probably things I get most excited about with my kids. Yeah.
I get you. I mean, I think Scratch, it's so great that Scratch was designed and was free, and it can be used anywhere. Like when I taught in China, we had access to it, which is not always the case with Google Docs, but it was with Scratch. And so I think it's such a great tool. And there's all these different spinoffs now, Scratch Junior and all these different things that you can do. And so, yeah, that's awesome. Okay. And then what book would you recommend everyone read at the moment?
Gosh, that's such a hard one, but because there's so much good stuff out there. But I keep finding myself going back to Innovative Mindset. Like I keep going back to that book, and everything George Couros says in there. It's like, you're still gonna like make a lot of this happen. I think that book is just really stuck with me. And then the other author I find myself gravitating to a lot is Michael Fullan. So anything about change in schools. So all of his books about schools and change and what that looks like. It's really also about innovation in schools and how we adapt to change, right? So George Couros and Michael Fullan are two people who I pay a lot of attention to.
I'm seeing a theme emerge here, Andy, this innovation in education, which is great. And, when we started, I was thinking, okay, we're going to talk about Maker Faire. And actually, Maker Faire is a byproduct of innovation in education, right? Like it's this idea of taking these project-based passions and turning them into something that's actionable, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's exciting, man. You got me pumped up, Andy, and it's the summertime. I can't be pumped up in the summertime, man. You're making me work too hard. No, that's okay. That's great. All right. Well, Andy, listen, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so I have a website called Pandian Online. I'll provide the link for you. And then I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is also Pandian Online. Everybody else had Andy Richardson or Andrew Richardson, and didn't work. I couldn't find anything, so I made up my own, which is Pandian Online. It's a little unwieldy, but yeah, that's a great way to get in touch with me.
Thank you, Andy. Well, listen, this has been really exciting, and I'd love to follow back up with you later on, maybe in 6 months or so, just to see how you're doing and where you've landed. And I think that folks would love to hear kind of what you end up doing and hearing about an update from your family and yourself. And so hopefully you would be willing to come back and talk about that sometime.
I absolutely would. Yeah. And thanks so much for having me on today. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed that episode of DesignCast. I'm Jason, your host, and I produced and created this podcast. If you have any input, I would love to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you again really soon.